Welcome to episode 64 of the World Builder's Anvil. As always, I'm your host, Jeffrey W. Ingram, and today's topic is Baurhdrakkiem Carver magic. Don't know where to start building your fantasy world? Do you need more? Does it make sense? Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination. This is the place that will help prime your mind. Now, it's time to heat up the forge, break out the mithril ingots and hammer. Welcome to the World Builder's Anvil. I'm your host, Jeffrey W. Ingram. Let's sup from the mug of Java and build. Okay, so there's a few things I want to talk about, much like I did with the spirit form of magic. Essentially a little bit about the inspirations, the magic system itself, and some common traits that will be shared among people who use this kind of magic. One, the inspirations, sort of the Norse rune magic. I always like the idea where the symbols carved into runes could possess magical powers. And classic D&D magic user magic, the idea of there are spells you learn. You can memorize these spells and cast these spells. My system isn't quite as limited with how spells are cast. It's more based on health. Which is something I sort of adapted from actually GURPS magic. But essentially it's this idea where you have spells that you shape, and certain spells are sort of grouped together, and you can sort of specialize or spread out amongst colleges. And it can grow and become complex with the culture. So first, let's talk a little bit about Carver magic. Why is it called Carver magic? Well, one, it's a very impermanent state of magic. So the practitioners don't typically use permanent items when creating things with this form of magic. So just so you have an idea of what I mean by that is, and really the reason why they call it Carver, the basic way a spell is sort of stored for use is to ritualistically carve it out on a board. And it's almost like writing a math formula on a cheat sheet, where essentially it's certain Baurhdrakkiem characters represent certain colleges, and you can take and manipulate those characters on a wooden board, take it and break it. And so the ritual time is really spent in preparing the board. And so that's the time element that goes into the magic system. And then there's this idea that you need to shape and summon the magic. And as I've explained before, the way magic works in my universe, it's sort of like this dark matter, this thing that is just outside of the human reach of understanding. We know it's there, but we can't explain it. But it's something that's physical in the universe. It's not a supernatural thing. It's not from another plane. At least it doesn't need to be. Hi, Rob. Ra's helping me today. And she wanted me to point out, too, that summoning magic is not like it's filtering it through your body out. So essentially, the way it works is, as you're casting the spell, you're summoning magic into your body from this sort of dark string, dark matter, dark energy part of the universe into your body. And then you shape it out of your body into a form. So if that form is, let's say, like the classic Dungeons and Dragons fireball, the magic filters into you and comes into a ball. And that's one of the reasons why the time element's important, because you're actually changing the universe around you a little bit. And as the magic pulls into you, you shape it into the form you want it to be, and then you can project it out however you need to. And depending on the complexity, determines on how much time and or energy it will take. Because time and energy are really interchangeable in this form of magic. You supplant energy by using time, or multiple people who are working in conjunction with each other to achieve the magical effect. And much the same way they can work together, they can work against each other. So I'm trying to build a fireball, and I could be right next to a mage who's actually trying to prevent me from doing that. So it's a little bit more dynamic, I think, than magic as it's typically done. However, the boards let you sort of cheat around it too, to where you can have this prepared disposable item that you break, and essentially all of the time that you've stored in there. And it's actually really a spell you're performing while you're doing it that's storing the magic into it. It's all released. It's been summoned into the board as you perform the ritual. You shape it as you're breaking it and it is done for it, it can be done very, very quickly. It's one of the advantages of this form of system is it can be performed quickly either through sacrificing energy, health, or just, planning ahead. And that's always one of the things I thought was neat about Dungeons and Dragons magic is, you were limited for a certain number of spells a day. And so as the caster, you kind of had to guess what your day was like. And that's sort of the same idea of here. When casters have time, they actually figure out how to make more boards. And there's only a limited number you can carry on yourself at one time. But certain kinds of things you might want to have readily available to happen quickly. Let's say you get stabbed. Maybe you have a board you can break and just touch yourself in your heel. Okay. Now, the thing is, shaping and summoning magic are skills. They are not an inherent magical ability. So you can work at it and become more proficient. And it's really individualized into spells. So let's say I'm learning how to make a field more fertile. The more I practice that spell, the better I understand it, the theory of it, and the actual presentation of it. The faster I can carve it, the more quickly I can cast it in general. So if I don't have a board, but I become well versed, I might no longer need a board to make the earth more filtered because I've become so adept at the skill that it really takes very little time for me to be able to perform the magic because I'm so intimate with it. And essentially the way that you can shape and summon magic are by speaking, breaking, and thinking. And when I say breaking, it's really the entire creation and breaking of the board that does it. And thinking is literally, if you become good enough, you can just think things through and they can happen. You're still performing the magic, it's just silently in your mind. But it is as fast as speaking. And has the same cost. You've become so skilled you can pull it off. Now, common traits that you'll see in learned magic harmony. And that's essentially the harmony you have with the dark matter of the universe. So you have you sort of have a certain level of your body that can absorb it in to utilize it where most people can't. Not everyone can use this form of magic. Not everyone can pull the magic into themselves. However, if they're in an area where there's a natural tendency for the magic to gather, areas that would typically end up like holy sites, they might be able to actually perform magic by knowing a spell even without magic harmony. But you're very limited in where you can perform spells if you do spells that way. Not very many people take the time to learn it if they can't use it more generally. And not many people know how to really use it anyway. It's still a relatively small part of the population. There's probably more people who can do spirit magic than who can do spell magic, learned magic. Now, there's another spell called the Curse of Thrax, and this goes to sort of the mythology of my world, the true mythology of my world, which is there was an argument with the early races, and there were curses placed on people. And one of the things is, if someone becomes too magical, they become too godlike, and ergo they can no longer exist on this plane of existence. There is very rough seas around the Pangaean-like continent, and there's the thing that moves around it I call the maelstrom, and it's not a storm as you'd understand it. It is a magical storm that moves around, appears, and disappears very quickly. And if you exceed a certain level of magic, it will swallow you because you're now too powerful for the world. And don't get me wrong, people do try and work their way around it, and some have. But it's very hard to do. And if you really hold on to it for too long, it doesn't matter how powerful you are, you will be swallowed whole and ejected from the plane of existence. Mage sight. This ability to see the flows of magic happening around you. It's a very useful skill. Mages don't need to have it, but it's something that they typically do have, or they would like to have. And some of them will compensate using magic to do the same trick, but it's more powerful if they have this trait because it becomes an innate ability for them. And another thing called genetic memory. And genetic memory can be different things, but in the scope of magic, if you had a parent who spent a lot of time learning magic and you have the abilities, sometimes some of those spells can happen inherently. It's actually somewhat dangerous. Most of the kids will die who have this because when they think the symbols that they remember, they cast spells since they've not prepared anything, they expend energy to perform it. A lot of times it doesn't start coming up until after their infancy to when they're really starting to form and use words. And they're trying to learn everything around them. And these little images of spells that they know are buried in their head. And sometimes can be brought out more completely. Sometimes it just allows them to learn spells more quickly than other people, or become more proficient at it quicker than other people. And other times it doesn't really help them at all. It becomes a hindrance. Sometimes they die because of it. So it's sort of a mixed bag. All right. The rating for this episode. This is an intermediate topic. I think all magic systems are an intermediate topic that need to be thought out pretty well. And like I said, you don't need a spell list. What you need to know is how it functions. And you can create spell lists as you're going about. As you create them, just add them into a spell list that you have. I like to formulate mine in colleges, so there's sort of elemental stuff, there are mind stuff, there are spells to help you socially, there are healing spells, spirit spells, all forms of spells are out there. You know, as your spell list grows, you'll probably want to organize them in a way that you think is culturally appropriate. The world building task for the day. Adapt or create a spell system for one of your fantasy cultures. And maybe you've already done this and you're done. Great job. If not, just do one and, you know, do some research on magic. Hi, boo. I'm being helped by kitties. I did not close my studio door, and the kitties are punishing me. Right? All right. So get out there and create this spell system for your fantasy culture. Hopefully your cat will not destroy your computer while you're doing it. And then for the real world task of the day, be flexible. That's right. And what I mean by be flexible is if something changes and you can't do what you're planning, figure out, is there something else that I can do in its place? Whether it's something fun or you have a small task you can take care of. Interchange when you do things. And if you can get that done, then it saves you a lot of time and headache going forward. And the tease for the next episode is another world review of Earth. But I should probably put more context around it because there are plenty of ways I can look at Earth. But I want to look at the world of Earth through the lens of Fallout. Because hopefully later this year, Fallout 4 will be coming out. Fallout is a game I've enjoyed. All 3 games have come out so far. Well, technically there have been more than 3 games because I played New Vegas as well too. But there's only been 1, 2, and 3. New Vegas is really the extension of 3. So great world. And we will talk about what I like about it next time. And as always, make sure to go to Gardul.com. That's GARDUL.com for the show notes. It'll be under podcasting, World Builders Anvil. That's a great place to get all of the information from the episode that you've just listened to and to see all the resources that we've talked about in this episode. Thanks for joining us this episode of the World Builders Anvil. Please be sure to rate and review us in iTunes, and please help get the word out to your friends about our show. And join me, Jeffrey W. Ingram at Gardul.com, to see the progress of my world and learn why I made the choices I did. And please contact me and let me know the topics you would love to hear in the future. Now strike while the myth rolls high.